Chapter 7, Humiliation. Caroline was in her glory. The only thing better than this would be standing on stage in a huge auditorium before 1,000 people. She loved being on stage. She adored being the center of attention. And someday she knew her name would be in lights on Broadway and people would pay $100 just to see Caroline Lenore Malloy in a play. Meanwhile, she had to make do with the fourth grade class at Buckman Elementary, and she played it for all it was worth. I decided that if I had to be Wally Hatford for a day, I should be as close to the real thing as I could get. So I borrowed his clothes, she said. The class laughed again, and Caroline could see Wally's ears burning as red as the nose on Rudolph the reindeer. It serves him right, she told herself. Wally would describe her as dramatic or loud or conceited or even crazy, but how dare he call her boring? Caroline Malloy was never boring, and so the brighter Wally's ears burned, the better she felt. What it's like to be Wally Hatford for a day is to be Mr. Average, she continued. He isn't very smart, but you can't call him stupid. He's never late for school, but he takes his time about getting here. The most interesting feature about Wallace James Hatford is that he lies. Miss Applebaum leaned forward and looked at Caroline. Caroline merely nodded for emphasis. It's sad but true. I discovered later that everything he told me during our interview was a story. His favorite food is not parsnips and chicken livers, it's pizza. The best book he ever read was not The History of Military Strategy in the United States in the 18th century. It's The Bodies in the Belsdorf Hotel. It took some skillful detective work on my part, but May I interrupt? Came Miss Applebaum's voice from behind her. Caroline frowned as she turned toward the teacher's desk. How rude. Who ever heard of interrupting an actress during a play? Stay in character, she told herself. Just freeze, and as soon as she stops talking, start in again right where you left off. This would be a good lesson. Class, these two reports are the finest examples I know of how not to conduct an interview. Caroline and Wally were obviously more intent on annoying each other than they were in doing the assignment, which was to improve our observing and listening skills. An interviewer who approaches her subject already knowing how she feels about him cannot possibly be unprejudiced. An interview like that is worse than no interview at all because it simply passes on to others our own prejudices. Therefore, both Wally and Caroline have failed the December project, and I don't think we need to hear any more, Caroline. You may take your seat. Caroline stood speechless at the front of the room. This couldn't be happening. You simply did not turn off the lights in the middle of a performance. You did not pull the curtain when the actress was center stage. She still had her best lines to say. She still had to tell how well. You may sit down, Caroline, though I would suggest you go into the restroom and change back into your own clothes. It was Caroline's face that burned now, but Wally seemed to take no pleasure in it. His ears were still fiery red, and he sat staring down at the pencil eraser on his desk. The rest of the class watched as Caroline stumbled back to her seat, picking up the shopping bag with her own clothes in it, and fled the room, tears running down her cheeks. This was horrible. It was awful. She had heard of plays closing in New York after only a few performances, but she had never, ever heard of a play so bad that they brought down the curtain right in the middle of the show. She leaned against the paper towel dispenser and bawled. For the rest of the day, Caroline did not look at Wally or he at her. She hardly looked at anyone else either, and the other kids left her alone. How would she ever get over the embarrassment? She would never live it down. Never, never, never. Why hadn't Miss Applebaum sent Wally to his seat when he described her as boring? He had deserved everything she had said about him. And then silently interviewing herself, Caroline admitted that she had planned the grand humiliation of Wally Hatford even before he'd got up to give his report, even before he'd called her life boring. In fact, the only reason she'd chosen him for a partner at all was to make him think she was his friend so he would accept a gross me out present. How could she think he would be friendly now? How did she think he'd dare open any gift she gave him? She had gotten so carried away by her own plan that she'd forgotten what she had set out to do in the first place. I don't care, she thought angrily, turning all the anger back toward Wally. I'm going to make him as miserable as I can this Christmas. And if we're both stuck in fourth grade for the rest of our lives, he'll be sorry he ever heard the name Malloy. Miss Applebaum did not say anything more to either Caroline or Wally that afternoon. The fact that it was snowing after school let out made it even worse somehow. Ordinarily, Caroline would climb up on the highest object handy, toss back her head, throw out her arms, and cry, "Snow, wonderful snow," letting it coat her hair and eyelashes. But she shuffled along with her head down, her shoulders hunched, until Beth caught up with her and grabbed her. "Caroline, what's wrong?" Caroline was afraid to answer for fear she might cry again. And if she cried out here on the sidewalk, someone would be bound to see and report it to the Hatfords. How could she feel so miserable in the season of peace and joy? How could she have acted so miserable, even to Wally Hatford? What's wrong? Only the major embarrassment of my life. Not only that, but I failed fourth grade. Her tears came in spite of herself. But by then, Eddie had called up and Caroline spilled out her story. Yikes. Major, major embarrassment. It was a stupid assignment, and Miss Applebaum wasn't fair. How can I tell Dad and Mom I'm repeating fourth grade? What if we move back to Ohio and I have to tell all my friends goodbye? I'm going back to fourth grade. You'll just have to talk to the teacher and ask what you can do for extra credit. Tell her how sorry you are. But what if she wants me to apologize to Wally? Ooh, that's a tough one, said Eddie. The girls got to the swinging bridge, but as they started across, they saw that the bridge was already jiggling. The Hatford boys were just walking off the other side and going right up the hill toward the Malloys' backyard, heading for the garage. Ooh, they think they're so smart, Caroline breathed in anger. They're just doing this to bother us. What do you suppose they want the loft for? It's not June after all. It's December. It's cold in there. There's only one way to find out, said Eddie. Beth turned. Spy on them? Exactly. Caroline began to feel all warm inside again, though not, she knew, with the Christmas spirit. Eddie and Beth were back in her corner again, making plans, and that was right where she wanted them to be. Chapter 8, Peter on the hot seat. Jake, Josh, Wally, and Peter trooped into the Benson's old garage and over to the ladder. It was nailed to the wall and led up through the opening in the floor above. Ladder still squeaks, Jake said, as he put his foot on the dusty rung and started up hand over hand. One by one, the boys emerged into the loft. Half the space held window screens and picture frames, and in the other, Wally saw an empty box of fireworks, old soda cans, thumbtacks, a mitten, a candy bar wrapper, string wire, and Chinese checkers. There was not enough room to stand up, but it didn't matter. We used to have a lot of fun up here, said Josh. They looked around some more, crawling over to the loft window, which directly faced the girls' house. Remember the time we strung up that pulley between the loft window and Tony Benson's room? It worked too. Yeah, we used to clip notes to the pulley and pass them back and forth. It was time, however, for the club meeting, and when Jake and Josh and Wally and Peter were sitting in a sort of a circle on the floor, Jake said, "Peter, take the hot seat." Peter, who had been running a little red double-decker matchbox bus along the floor, quickly looked up. Why? And then he saw the looks on his brothers' faces. What? He said. Go ahead, take the hot seat, said Wally. Peter crawled into the center of the circle and looked from one brother to the next. Okay, how'd she get them? Asked Jake, who always seemed to take over. I don't know, said Peter. I don't know how Caroline got his clothes. The boys looked at each other. Then how did you even know we were talking about Caroline? Asked Josh. How did you know we were talking about clothes? Wally demanded. Peter was confused. Well, what were you talking about then? Caroline and my clothes, said Wally angrily. You gave them to her, didn't you? Well, she asked. Whose side are you on anyway? Wally bellowed. If she had asked you to cut off our heads, would you have done that too? No. What did she pay you, Peter? Come on, what'd she give you to steal Wally's clothes? I didn't steal them, I borrowed them. What did she pay you? Wally yelled. Peter held out his matchbox bus. A matchbox car? You betrayed one of your brothers for a matchbox car? It's a double-decker. For a while, Peter's brothers just sat there staring at him. Maybe he's too young to be in our club. Peter's head dropped. Either that or he can't be trusted. Peter's lips began to tremble. Okay, Peter, you either have to give back that bus or you have to get back every single thing you gave Caroline. I mean, everything. I will. I told you she only borrowed them. There was the sound of voices outside, and the boys suddenly stopped talking and crawled over to peek out the loft window. How come they're just getting home from school now? What have they been doing all this time? Nothing good, you can bet. The four boys watched the girls go in the back door of their house. You think they know what we're up to? Who cares? Squatters' rights. We got that official permit from the Bensons, and besides, Mr. Malloy said we could use the loft. Josh took a magic marker from his pocket and a sheet of paper from his school notebook. Explorers Club, members only, he printed in heavy black letters and tacked it to the wall. Do you really think that will keep Caroline out? Asked Wally. Of course not. It'll just bug them to death that we're up here, Josh said, grinning. I'm hungry. Let's go home and make a pizza or something. They climbed down from the loft and Jake said, all except you, Peter. Why? Because you're going to walk over there and knock on the Malloy's door and get Wally's clothes back. That's why. We'll see you at home. The three older brothers headed out across the Malloy's backyard and down the hill toward the swinging bridge. Wally turned around once and saw Peter standing at the Malloy's back door, his head down, knocking with one tightly rolled up fist. Good. Let him be miserable for a while. Peter had no right to take Wally's clothes and give them to Caroline. Now Wally and Caroline were both in trouble. They both failed the December project, and he had no doubt that any day now his folks would receive a letter in the mail from Miss Applebaum saying, Dear Mr. and Miss Hatford, I very much regret to inform you that your own son, Wallace Hatford, is failing the 4th grade. The water below had an icy look, and the wind whipped at their jackets as the boys moved along the bouncing footbridge. Ducks flew overhead in a V formation as though escorting winter in, and the snow was still coming down. When they reached the other side, they climbed up the bank and crossed the road. What's that? Asked Josh, pointing. Over on the Hatford step sat something that looked like a big white ball, a lumpy ball, a ball with a face. What is it? Jake wondered. Underpants, Wally cried. With a face painted on them? My underpants, said Wally. He was right. Caroline had taken all the clothes Peter had given her, all the things she wore when she gave her report, and stuffed them into Wally's underpants until they bulged like a balloon. Then she had painted a smiling face on the seat of the pants. Wally desperately pulled his baggy blue pants out of the bundle, then his socks and shoes, but he held the underpants up with 2 fingers. How could he ever put them on again when Caroline had been in them? Mom would want to know how the face got on the pants. And if he said Caroline, she might think Caroline had drawn the picture with them still wearing them. He'd get even with Caroline. Don't think he wouldn't. Wally walked out in the kitchen where Josh was sticking a pizza in the microwave. There was a note on the table. Boys, don't fill up on pizza. We're having steak tonight, and I want you to be hungry. We'll be hungry, Josh said to nobody in particular. I want to finish that painting for Mom tonight. Then I've got to think of something for Dad. It's you guys I have to shop for, Jake said. I've already got presents for the folks. Boy, I hope they remember how much I want a skateboard. As they were eating their second pizza, Wally said, I wonder where Peter is. Trying to get your clothes back when they were here all along. They're probably giving him a hard time. Should we call over there and tell them to send him home? I'll bet he's standing in the hall crying with Caroline telling him all kinds of lies. Like how she lost Wally's clothes or something and she's making him look all over their house. He'll think twice before he tries that trick again. The phone rang. It was Mom. Everything okay? She asked. Sure, fine, said Wally. You boys didn't eat pizza, did you? It's okay. We're still starving. Ask Peter if he turned in his lunch money like he was supposed to. I'll ask him when he comes in, said Wally. Where is he? Over at the Malloys. The Malloys? What's he doing there? I'm not sure, said Wally. Well, for heaven's sakes, do I have to do everything myself? Mother said and hung up. Wally looked at the others. What does that mean? Maybe we better go get him. Yeah, not me, said Jake. I don't want to go either, said Josh. Listen, you guys, we're all in charge of Peter till Mom gets home, you know. It's not just me, said Wally. The phone rang again. It was Mom. He's baking cookies, she said.